There's a pattern I've noticed over years of looking at retirement plans, and it's not what most people expect. The expensive mistakes are almost never about investment choices. They're not about picking the wrong fund or missing a market rally. The mistakes that actually cost people, in some cases tens of thousands of dollars, sometimes more, tend to be quieter than that. They're assumptions people made years ago and never revisited. Decisions that felt safe at the time. Things nobody flagged because they looked reasonable on paper. Today, I want to walk you through four of them. Four mistakes I see in retirement plan after retirement plan, regardless of savings level, regardless of income, regardless of how carefully someone thought they were planning. Not to scare you, but because if any of these are sitting in your plan right now, you can fix them. And fixing them is almost always worth the effort. I'm Melanie Kent, and let's get into it. The first one trips up more people than almost anything else I've seen, and the data backs that up. Meet Mike. He's been working for the same company for 28 years. He's in decent shape, likes his job well enough, and his plan has always been to work until 67. At 67, he gets his full Social Security. His 401k has had more time to grow, and everything lines up. Clean plan. He's 59. Last year, his company restructured. His position was eliminated. Mike didn't choose to retire early. It happened. And now, his carefully constructed plan, built entirely on the assumption that he'd work until 67, has a significant problem. He's 8 years short of where he planned to be, with healthcare costs to cover before Medicare kicks in at 65, and Social Security he hadn't planned to touch for another 8 years. Here's why this matters beyond Mike's specific situation. The Employee Benefits Research Institute surveyed 3,600 retirees between the ages of 62 and 75. They found that 58% had been forced into retirement earlier than planned. Not chose early retirement, forced into it. The primary reasons were health issues or disability, 38%, and employer restructuring, layoffs, or buyouts, 23%. More than half, forced out. And Lincoln Financial Group found that more than 60% of retirees said they'd go back and do things differently if they could. When you ask them what specifically, it's almost always about flexibility. Plans that were too rigid. Plans that assumed a timeline that didn't hold. So the first mistake is building a retirement plan that only works if you stay healthy and employed until the exact age you're targeting. Because the data says there's better than a coin flip chance that doesn't happen. What does the fix look like? It's not complicated. It's running your numbers at 2 or 3 different ages. Your target, 3 years earlier, and 5 years earlier, and asking what each scenario actually looks like. If the 5 years early scenario is catastrophic, your plan is fragile in a specific way you now know about, and knowing about it is the only way to do something about it. Have you thought about this scenario yourself? What does your plan look like if you were forced out 3 years earlier than expected? Drop it in the comments. I'm genuinely curious whether this one resonates. The second mistake is one that shows up almost universally among people with most of their savings in traditional 401ks and IRAs, which is the majority of American retirees. Susan is 66. She has $640,000 in her traditional 401k. She's been looking at that number for years and feeling pretty good about it. She knows she'll have to pay taxes when she withdraws, but she figures it'll work out fine. She'll be in a lower bracket in retirement, so the taxes won't be that bad. Here's what Susan hasn't fully thought through. Every single dollar in her traditional 401k is pre-tax money. She's never paid income tax on any of it. When she withdraws $50,000 in a year, the IRS sees $50,000 of ordinary income. When her Social Security kicks in and she pulls from the 401k on top of that, her combined income goes up, and that directly affects how much of her Social Security gets taxed. This is the part that catches people completely off guard. Social Security isn't automatically tax-free in retirement. Whether it's taxed and how much depends on what the IRS calls your combined income. That's your adjusted gross income plus any tax-exempt interest plus half of your Social Security benefits. Here are the verified 2026 thresholds directly from the IRS. If you're single and your combined income is below $25,000, your Social Security isn't taxed at all. Between $25,000 and $34,000, up to 50% of your benefits may be taxable. Above $34,000, up to 85% of your benefits can become taxable income. For married couples filing jointly, those thresholds are $32,000 and $44,000. Now, here's something worth pausing on. Those thresholds were set in 1983 and 1993, and they have never been indexed for inflation. A threshold designed to only affect high-income retirees in 1983 now catches solidly middle-class retirees who were never the intended target. More people cross it every single year just because of inflation, without any change to the law. When Susan pulls $40,000 from her 401k in a year on top of her Social Security, she may find herself with up to 85% of her Social Security benefits included in her taxable income. That's not an 85% tax rate, to be very clear. It means up to 85% of the benefit gets added to her taxable income at whatever her marginal rate is. But the point is that more of her income is taxable than she expected. And for a lot of people, the after-tax check looks meaningfully different from the number they were planning around. The fix here is to understand your own combined income projection before you start withdrawing, not after. And if there's a gap between now and when your RMDs start, that's often the best window to do strategic Roth conversions. Pay tax now at a lower rate so that future withdrawals come out tax-free, and don't push your combined income higher. The third mistake builds directly from the second one, and it's called the RMD trap. This one catches people who have done everything right. Alan is 72. He's been disciplined his entire career. He maxed his 401k contributions for decades. He has $1.4 million saved. He's proud of it, and he should be. At 73, the IRS is going to start making income decisions for Alan whether he wants them to or not. Required minimum distributions, RMDs, are mandatory annual withdrawals the IRS requires from traditional 401ks and IRAs starting at age 73. The amount is calculated by dividing your account balance by an IRS life expectancy factor. For someone at 73, that divisor is 26.5. So on a $1.4 million IRA, Alan's RMD in his first year is roughly $52,830. He has to withdraw that amount and pay ordinary income tax on it, whether he needs the money or not. Now add Social Security. Alan is receiving $2,800 a month, $33,600 a year. Half of that is $16,800. Add his $52,830 RMD. His combined income is $69,630. That's well above the $44,000 married threshold, which means 85% of his Social Security, about $28,560, gets added to his taxable income. Stack it all together, and Alan is staring at a much larger tax bill than he imagined. Not because he made bad decisions, because he made good decisions in a tax-deferred account for 30 years and never thought about what the forced distributions would look like at 73. The penalty for missing an RMD is 25% of the amount you should have taken. If you catch and correct the mistake quickly, Secure Act 2.0 dropped that to 10%. But the real cost isn't the penalty. It's the tax burden you didn't plan for. There are strategies that help. Qualified charitable distributions, or QCDs, allow anyone 70 and a half or older to donate up to $108,000 a year directly from an IRA to a qualified charity. That amount counts toward your RMD, never enters your adjusted gross income, and therefore never pushes your Social Security into higher tax territory. If you give to charity anyway, this is almost always more tax efficient than taking the RMD as cash and then donating separately. Roth conversions before 73 are the other main tool. Converting portions of your traditional IRA to Roth in the years between retirement and RMD age reduces the balance that's subject to future mandatory distributions, and Roth withdrawals have no effect on your combined income calculation. The window between retirement and your first RMD is the most valuable tax planning window most people have. Alan didn't use it because no one told him it existed. Now he's working with a smaller set of options. If this is your situation, if you have a large traditional 401k or IRA and you're between retirement and 73, this is your window. It won't be open forever. Subscribe while we're here if this kind of analysis is useful. This is exactly what we do every week. The fourth mistake is less about a specific rule and more about a pattern of thinking. It shows up across income levels and savings levels, and it's the one that makes all the others harder to fix. Beth is 57. She knows her retirement plan isn't fully dialed in. She knows she should probably look more carefully at her Social Security options, think about the tax issue, figure out the healthcare bridge. She knows. But there's time. She'll figure it out later. She always has. What behavioral finance research consistently shows is that people systematically overestimate how much time and how many options they'll have later. They assume their health will hold, their job will hold, their capacity to deal with complicated financial decisions will hold. And they push the analysis off because later always feels more spacious than now. Here's what the data says about later. According to a 2025 report by Capitalize, Americans have left behind $2.1 trillion in retirement savings across 32 million forgotten accounts, money people moved away from when they changed jobs and just never rolled over. That's not a small number of irresponsible people. That's a systemic pattern of, I'll deal with it later, compounding across millions of people over decades. The other thing about Beth's situation, the decisions that matter most in retirement planning, Roth conversion windows, Medicare enrollment timing, Social Security filing strategy, catch-up contribution windows, all have deadlines. Some of them are soft deadlines. Some of them are hard ones. Miss the Medicare enrollment window and you pay a penalty for life. Miss the Roth conversion window between retirement and 73, and you've lost the most efficient years to do it. File Social Security at the wrong time, and that decision is permanent. Later doesn't accommodate those deadlines particularly well. This isn't about panicking. It's about recognizing that the value of clarity now is much higher than the value of clarity after the window has passed. And for most people, the action items are concrete and manageable. Check your SSA.gov projections, pull your real expense number, understand your combined income picture before RMDs start. None of those things require perfection. They just require doing them while there's still time to act on what you find. 4 mistakes. A forced early retirement you didn't plan for. Tax-deferred accounts being treated as tax-free. The RMD trap that blindsides disciplined savers. And the habit of leaving analysis for later when later has real deadlines. None of these require unusual sophistication to address. They just require knowing they're there, which you now do. What was the one that hit closest to home? Mike's situation, the tax question, the RMD piece, or Beth's approach? Tell me in the comments. These conversations always go somewhere useful. See you next week.